I want to get your thoughts just quickly on this Senate bill that was dragged across the finish line, with particular attention to the way in which the billionaire class, and you've written about the elite class in your writings in the past and how they take advantage of the tax system already, are again given a big fat favor from this administration.
Yeah, and it's been astonishing to watch a number of independent bloggers stop people who are wearing Trump regalia and interview them about the bill. Clearly, they have no clue to what's in it. The simple fact is that the U.S. economy has done terrifically for almost 50 years now, but the bottom 90% of workers have gone essentially nowhere. And this bill simply reduces further the burdens on people, some of whom make multiple billion-dollar annual incomes. Think about that, not wealth of being a billionaire, but annual incomes in the billions of dollars. And it's going to hurt you even if you're comfortable, because by cutting Medicaid as severely as this is going to happen, your 2027 health insurance premiums are going to go up. I will not be surprised if they go up somewhere between 15 and 25% to make up for the Medicaid revenue that won't be flowing to hospitals. If you live in a rural area, you probably are going to lose your hospital. And all of this so that people who can't spend in a lifetime what they make in 1 year can pay less in taxes. This is it's despicable. And I think that the Republican senators who voted for this, particularly the ones who were critical of it, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, used her vote, this past 51-50, to extract all sorts of extraordinary favors for Alaska. But she did so at the expense of all the other states. And the chickens will come home to roost about this. And here, one little number to keep in mind. When I wrote my books, Perfectly Legal, Free Lunch, and The Fine Print, I had back of the envelope sort of estimates of how money is being redistributed upward. The Rand Corporation in Santa Monica, which started out 75 years ago as a think tank created by Boeing and the Air Force, did the kind of study Rand has the capability of doing. And they concluded that over what's roughly the last 50 years, $50 trillion was redistributed through government upward to the top 10th of 1%. 50 trillion, it's $1 trillion a year. On average. I mean, obviously it's heavily loaded to the most recent years. But the reason so many people are struggling, the reason so many people are worried about paying their rent, the reason so many people are in debt is because government has created this massive welfare system, not just for corporations, which is a lot of what I've written about, but for very wealthy people who control corporations. And they're the ones who don't need subsidies.
But for those reasons, they, of course, get additional subsidies. They have so much control over our political system, which is awash in money.
Well, I once had a New York State senator with whom I shared a cab into Manhattan from LaGuardia Airport when I used to commute to work in New York by plane once a week, at least when I went to New York. And he said to me something I thought was very fascinating. And he's from a billionaire family. He's not a billionaire, but the family are. He said, you know, every morning when I'm shaving, I think about my 10 biggest donors and what they want, and how I have to indicate to them I'm trying to get it for them, even though in many cases they would be worse off if they got it. It's really not good for them. They just think it is. And I've got to demonstrate to them I'm trying to do it, or they'll just fund somebody else.
Wow.
Okay. But then he said the important part. He said, you know, I don't recall one time in the last 10 years, that's how long you've been in the New York State Senate. I don't recall one time in the last 10 years that I stood there shaving and thought about what should I be doing today for my average constituent. And he's a Democrat.
Wow.
And I mean, the real constituents of people in Congress are the donor class. the liberal reforms brought about by Common Cause and others, and that I played a role in getting made into law in Michigan. By the way, we intensely reported the campaign finance reform bills. My boss and I were accused by a Republican state senator of journalism by terrorism, because we reported everything. If you showed up late for a committee hearing, you went on the front page of the paper. If as one state senator did, you walked into the room, put your hand in your palm and started snoring, we reported that. And so they passed these tough bills, and they all have turned out to be a disaster. And then you add the Supreme Court decisions, 3 of them, the last of which is Citizens United, and you end up with what we have today, which is a Congress that has been thoroughly rented by the donor class.
And you have now a chief executive who is completely for sale as well. And so you end up with an entire system, wall to wall, that is completely gutted of anything really for the constituents, and more, as you say, for the donor class. The sad environmental stuff that's buried in there, incentives to develop alternative energies, which really do show promise all around the world, they are gone.
Well, the cheapest electricity now, Mark, is solar, followed by wind. Even if you strip away the existing subsidies that the Republicans are about to get rid of, it's still the cheapest form of electricity. So it's very simple. What Donald Trump and the Republicans are doing is they're voting to raise prices for energy.
Well, it's exactly that. And it's also likely to, at a time when the grid is being pressured in ways that reflect climate change. These temperatures, even today, across America are hotter and at record levels. There's more and more of a pressure on that electric grid, which has fewer and fewer sources of energy if you're taking away the alternative energy, which they are.
And there's another element to this, and that is, as we build new transmission lines, transmission line is a monopoly right of way. Typically, utility companies are allowed to earn a rate of return on their assets of about 10%, 10 and a quarter, maybe 10 and a half, 10%. Since they're usually half equity and half borrowed money, it really means they're earning about 15% on their equity, 12.5 to 15%, depending on their structure and costs. The federal government is approving transmission lines with 16% rates of return, which is just a ripoff of customers. There's no need to pay 16% to get someone to build a high tension power line. That's absurd. It's a monopoly once you've got it. And what you're seeing is a on steroids effort now to mine the American people and empty their pockets, conveying that money to the super rich.
The monopoly that you talk about, particularly when it pertains to energy, is sort of understood. Like in California, we have that. It's granted such that you're not going to have competition. That's the deal that we make with you as the state, because we know it's going to be really costly for you to set up all these wires and set up all, the infrastructure. But the trade-off is that we're going to have to approve all of your rates, that you're essentially going to have to work in conjunction with the state. The only problem is the regulators are pretty much in the pocket of all of those providers.
Well, the last time I checked the California Public Utilities Commission, which I covered in the late 70s and early 80s for the LA Times, there were no consumer advocates there at all. And there weren't even sort of disinterested citizens, economically disinterested. They were all people who had a vested interest in the utility companies. I've written at length about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which deals with everything from the height water can be behind hydroelectric dams, you'd care a lot about if you own waterfront property, or live downstream of the dam, should it fail, like in Johnston, Pennsylvania over 100 years ago, to the rates of return on interstate transmission lines. And that organization was so deeply in the pocket that I referred to the former chairwoman who came from one of the big utilities and went back to the big utilities as a sightless sheriff. Essentially, if she were on the vice squad and was sent to a bordello to check it out so the cops could raid the place, she would be the person who would report back and say, well, I went to this house and there were these men in suits and women standing around in lingerie, but I didn't see anything illegal going on.
Right. I'm shocked to know that there's gambling going on in my establishment.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. But I'm going to pivot. The coalition around Donald Trump has hardened. The word is out that the strong man knows what he wants, and you get situations like Tillis on the floor of the Senate talking about the fact that he doesn't want to take on the Trump machine. So that's the implication. And here he was making remarks last night. Go ahead.
So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid? Now Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid. I will be withholding my vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
So there you have it, David. But as you say, he just didn't want to go up against the Trump machine. And there are those who are breaking away, but they're not breaking away with dissent to the president as they remain in office. They're breaking away with dissent as they say, hey, I'm tapping out. I don't want any more of this.
Right. And I would argue that's sort of a form of voluntary obedience. And if there's anything that we are warned by Professor Timothy Snyder, who's a great expert on authoritarianism, not to do. Rule number one, do not voluntarily obey. But that's what you're seeing, people walking away. And the original coward here was Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's religion teaches that one day the Constitution will hang as if by a thread, and a member of the priesthood shall step forward and save the nation. And Romney could have done a lot. He said the right thing sort of now and then, but just like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, at the end of the day, he folds.
It's performative with these people. I also want to pivot just because your work with Trump and your knowledge of Trump is so great. Here is Trump talking about something, and this pertains to the Iran thing. It happened while you were away, but I know that you caught it because I think you dropped me an email on it. And this is Donald Trump actually remarking on the fact, this is at the NATO summit. He's remarking on the fact that the Iranians had tipped him off and that he greenlit, in essentially so many words, the attack on an American Air Force base. Go ahead, Tony.
Made in America, because we have the best hardware in the world. You saw that where 14 missiles were shot at us the other day. And they were very nice. They gave us warning. They said, we're going to shoot them. Is 1 o'clock okay? They said, it's fine. And everybody was emptied off the base, so they couldn't get hurt except for the gunners. They call them the gunners. And out of 14 high-end missiles that were shot at the base in Qatar, all 14, as you know, were shot down by our equipment. Amazing stuff.
Okay, so
Amazing
David,
that they can do
that is something that really does jump out at you.
Well, first of all, let's not be naive about this. This is how these things work. When Trump decided early in his first term he was going to hit a Russian airbase in Syria, our Pentagon called up their military and said, hey, we're going to bomb this place, and here's when it's going to happen. And so they flew the planes away, and everybody got in Jeeps or their Russian equivalent and left. So it isn't that we don't do things like that. But imagine if that person standing there and saying this had been Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, the Jimmy Carter. The Republicans would have gone crazy with this, and it would have been reported as page one news and made all three networks. And the reason I sent the link to that clip to you is the only place I found it reported was in one of the
Avenue Farm.
Was in one of the minor, news sites that's very, very focused on some leftist sort of ideology about it. And that's only because somebody, I don't read it, somebody sent that to me. But it's part of the
But
problem.
let me just get clear. What's problematic about it is that he says the quiet part out loud. He says the part where you kind of, it's understood that this happens, that there's a performative aspect to save face. We have to send missiles over. We're going to send them over at 1 o'clock. But your point is you don't talk about that publicly as a president of the United States.
And remember, during the first term, when Mark Milley spoke with General, I think it was a Chinese general, because Trump had made some very bellicose remarks that had China very upset. He called him and said, "Don't worry about it. That's just talk. Nothing's going to happen." And Trump immediately started claiming this was treasonous. And you know, the world works the way the world works. So on one hand, what Trump said is sort of not news, but boy, if you think about the built-in sort of inability of the press to grasp who Donald Trump is and to write about him. Yesterday, I watched the new Robert De Niro film that's on HBO about Frank Costello and Vito Genovese. And
Sure.
De Niro plays both roles very brilliantly, and he doesn't look like the same person. They made him up very well. And one of the things that comes away from that was how much the American mobsters played the press. Reporters who just, they didn't, you know, they took the quotes they got from people, but they didn't know how enough of them how to dig deeper. There's always been in this country some really great mob reporters, but the overall tenor of the coverage is as we're seeing with Trump. There's some really great coverage, and then there's a whole lot of unbelievably thoughtless, failing to recognize who and what he is coverage.
Well, I also think there's sort of this, the White House says that the new administration will produce this many, and it's just like almost a stenographer kind of job now instead of a real reporting. But now let me just be fair to broadcasters, media, journalists, et cetera. They've been cowed. I mean, they I think in large measure, their parent organizations have told them, hey, back off. We don't want to get into a pissing match with the president of the United States.
Well, and absolutely. And if you, for instance, if you're Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who owns the LA Times, your $10 or so billion fortune doesn't come from the LA Times. That's losing $1 million a week on you out of your pocket. It comes from drugs, and you need approvals from the FDA. So he has a powerful incentive to, align himself with the administration.
I love that you mentioned the LA Times, because it does seem as though what they've done is they've kind of concentrated their coverage more locally on California, which is a fair way to go. I mean, in a way, it's better than soft pedaling Trump. I wanted to quickly, David, in our limited time, I want to ask you about something. This is a Justice Department memo that is really staggering. The Trump administration intending to ramp up denaturalizations and broaden the criteria that's used to determine if a naturalized citizen's citizenship could be stripped away. Now, this is...
As I read the memo, it might be done even for civil rather than criminal matters. So you become a U.S. citizen and there's some minor criminal charge against you. Trump wants the Justice Department to start the process of taking away your citizenship as a naturalized citizen and then throw you out of the country. And Trump is like, we're going to get rid of all these people. Fundamentally, it's going to damage the economy. We're already seeing in the case of the raids on the farms and fields, it's harder to find some fresh grocery products, and prices have been marked up on a number of them. Not a lot, but some. This is all part of Donald's core campaign, which is make America white again and make sure it's male dominated. And he's going to keep going as long as Congress lets him.
The building of these detention camps, they're really concentration camps. There's one going up, I think, in the Alligator Alcatraz. They're selling merch.
Alligator Auschwitz might be a better name.
Oh, that's exactly it. Right. And they're selling merch with it. Kim had the merch story. I mean, it's so grotesque. It's crazy. But they literally have hats and shirts that say Alligator Alcatraz. Anyway, there's that, and then there are other, facilities going up, and they're going up all over the country. I wonder if you can give me a beat on this, because this does involve, a a zeal about getting all of these. It's primarily Latinos. It seems to me that they've singled out the Latino community, but now I see the Iranian community in Los Angeles also included. It seems that zeal is being applied in a really aggressive fashion.
If you drive the Cross Florida Highway near Miami and you're in an 18-wheeler, and I only know this because one of my sons used to be an 18-wheeler driver, and you look down, you will just see alligators, so many you would imagine you could walk across their backs for miles. And there's an abandoned airstrip in the Everglades with all these alligators. They've put up tents. They do have some level of air conditioning, not that it would be very efficient with tents. What happens when a hurricane with 200-mile-an-hour winds comes bearing down on those tents? People are going to die. And Trump doesn't care. I mean, he doesn't care about anybody. He has no empathy at all. But yeah, there's an image on the screen, those of you who are watching online. And this is a terrible, terrible way to treat people. What they're hoping is it'll have two effects. One is that people who have been captured will say, I'm going to stop fighting just to put me on a plane and get me out of here. And the other is that people won't come into the U.S. And people, I guess the third effect, which is people who are here will self-deport.
Right. And that self-deport.
So, but all of this is reflective of nothing more than the racism and misogyny of the Trump administration. And at the core of this, how is it that Trump is not more unpopular? Well, these interviews I mentioned that I've seen with video bloggers online, it's very clear that a whole lot of Trump supporters live in a universe that has no relationship to facts. They presumably are, if they're getting any news at all, it's from places like Breitbart and One News America and maybe Fox. There was a woman with a Trump girl shirt on in one of these who went on and on and on about how under Biden, our taxes went up and the tax policy was just horrible. And she goes on. And the guy finally says, well, you do realize that's the Donald Trump tax law that was enacted during his term and is still in effect. You're a liar. And other people going, you're a liar. There's no, you really are dealing with a cult. There's no getting through this belief system that has nothing to do with the real world. And the longer Trump is in office and the more successful these other outfits are convincing people of nonsense, the more difficult it's going to be to get ourselves out of this hole and the less likely that our democracy will survive Donald Trump.
You know, David, it just seems to me that the complete capture of government is something that he's been successful at doing. And one of the things I heard him, I was watching him, and they called it a round table. It was sort of the discussion of this alligator Alcatraz place, and DeSantis was there. This is at Mar-a-Lago. And anyway, he talked about the fact that, because he was asked about Medicaid, he said Medicaid cuts, if they happen, that would be the fault of Democrats. He said that the Democrats have been looking at cutting Medicaid, and a lot of their programs are the reason that Medicaid would have to be cut. So if there are any cuts to Medicaid, it's the Democrats' fault. And I thought, oh, wow, so that's the plan. It's to cut it, but it's to blame the Democrats. And if he says it enough, David, as you know, those people to whom you've referred, they all regurgitate it.
The big lie works. The idea that the Democrats are want to get rid of Medicaid is hilarious. On the other hand, there are people on the left who are screwing this up by not being factual. There's a meme going around right now about how FDR got us Medicaid. I'm sorry, Medicaid came in 1965. FDR had been dead for 20 years at that point. You know, people who are in the center or on the left, people who are not MAGA, they really need to be careful to show respect for facts. There's a meme right now that I wrote about on my Facebook page, which is open for anybody, facebook.com/DavidK, one word. This is a iron bar, 1,000 grams. It costs $100. Well, first of all, 1,000 grams of steel, 2.2 pounds, costs less than $1. Number one. Then it says you could turn this into $250 with horseshoes. Well, horseshoes often weigh 2 pounds. And even if you add they cost 10 to 14 bucks if you're buying them retail. If you add the cost of a farrier, somebody said, oh, it'd make it easily worth $250. No, I'm sorry, I've owned horses. I never paid, even when you inflation adjust, $250 to put one horseshoe on one hoof of a horse. And then if you do the next thing, you'll be worth 70,000 and then millions of dollars. And it's utter and complete nonsense that tells us we are losing critical thinking skills. We're losing the most incredibly basic arithmetic skills. You know, how many people know what 1,000 grams means, that it's 2.2 pounds? Frankly, not a lot. It's very clear from some answers I've seen posted, because I went looking for these and put retorts to them, that some people think that's like 1,000 pounds or a ton.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out here, and frankly, you're right. It's never cross-referenced. It's just picked up off of social, and we run with it. But you make a really good point, which is that the left and even centrists, people who have righteous arguments, need to be true to the facts.
Well, and principled Republicans, and Tillis is to some degree establishing that he has principles.
Right, exactly.
And we should, don't.
And Murkowski and Collins are establishing the opposite. Yeah.
It's a big mistake. All Republicans are evil, all terrible. No, you want to encourage people who have principles. I couldn't stand my father-in-law's principles. He was a premier, perhaps premier school desegregation lawyer in America in the 60s for the losing side.
Oh, wow.
But he also came to this through a belief system rooted historically that concerned him. If he were alive today, my father-in-law, who died almost 30 years ago, would be tearing his hair out over Donald Trump and saying, "What is wrong with you people? This is not principled. This is not honest." So even if you disagree with people, if they're principled, respect that they are principled and encourage people to be principled.
Yeah, those are the discussions we're going to have. David, thanks. We're out of time. Love our visits. Glad you're back. David K. Johnston, everyone. See you next week. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.